Namaste, and welcome to our continuing series on the life divine with our beloved Ranga. Today we are on page 341, the last paragraph.
We have to read the para beginning with "but in fact." But I think it's about 2 weeks now that.
Yes, it
so
is.
I'll read out the summary of the previous para so that we get the sense of continuity.
Yes, very good.
Okay, so in the previous para he said, this comprehensive view is convincing to the spiritual integral total outlook, but not to our limited mind. He will explain. There are constant opposites and contraries that are logically untenable in the comprehensive view at the highest level. There are contraries which are harmonized. But in the physical world, the contraries are not harmonized. They continue to be contraries. Good, evil, okay, hot, cold, they are opposites. They cannot be harmonized. So, he is giving examples. There in that level, at the highest level, the infinite can become finite. The immutable constantly mutates itself into into finite forms. The one reality becomes the multiplicities of the cosmos. The impersonal becomes the personal. The universal becomes the individual. The individual universalizes himself. Being slips into becoming. The Saguna and the Nirguna are both Brahman. The witness non-doer becomes the executor of all works. So this is at the highest comprehensive level, this is what you come across. But in the physical world, they are all contraries. What is applicable at one level is not at another plane. All is a supra-rational mystery, the works of a magician who creates illusions as well as realities. Which is the truth? This is what he said in the previous para. So now we'll read the para that we have to read today. But in fact, we'll read the whole para first. But in fact, the cause of this impression must necessarily be sought not in anything illusory or fantastic in the supreme or the universal self-existence, but in our own inability to seize the supreme clue to its manifold existence or discover the secret plan and pattern of its action. The self-existent is the infinite, and its way of being, the self-existent is infinite, and its way of being and of action must be the way of the infinite. But our consciousness is limited. Our reason built upon things finite. It is irrational to suppose that a finite consciousness and reason can be a measure of the infinite. This smallness cannot judge that immensity. This poverty, bound to a limited use of its scanty means, cannot conceive the opulent management of those riches. An ignorant half-knowledge cannot follow the motions of an all-knowledge. Our reasoning is based upon our experience of the finite operations of physical nature. On an incomplete observation and uncertain understanding of something that acts within limits, it has organized on that basis certain conceptions which it seeks to make general and universal. And whatever contradicts or departs from these conceptions, it regards as irrational, false, or inexplicable. But there are different orders of the reality, and the conceptions, measures, standards suitable to one need not be applicable to another order. Our physical being is built first upon an aggregate of infinitesimals, electrons, atoms, molecules, cells. But the law of action of these infinitesimals, does not explain all the physical workings even of the human body, much less can they cover all the law and process of action of man's supraphysical parts, his life movements and mind movements and soul movements. In the body, finites have been formed with their own habits, properties, characteristic ways of action. The body itself is a finite, which is not a mere aggregate of these smaller finites, which it uses as parts, organs, constituent instruments of its operations. It has developed a being and has a general law which surpasses its dependence upon these elements or constituents. The life and mind again are supraphysical finites with a different and more subtle mode of operation of their own, and no dependence on the physical parts for instrumentation can annul their intrinsic character. There is something more and other in our vital and mental being and vital and mental forces than the functioning of a physical body. But again, each finite is in its reality or has behind it an infinite which has built and supports and directs the finite it has made as its self-figure, so that even the being and law and process of the finite cannot be totally understood without a knowledge of that which is occult within or behind it. Our finite knowledge, conceptions, standards may be valid within their limits, but they are incomplete and relative. A law founded upon an observation of what is divided in space and time cannot be confidently applied to the being and action of the indivisible. Not only it cannot be applied to the spaceless and timeless infinite, but it cannot be applied even to a time infinite or a space infinite. A law and process binding for our superficial being need not be binding on what is occult within us. Again, our intellect, founding itself on reason, finds it difficult to deal with what is infrarational. Life is infrarational, and we find that our intellectual reason applying itself to life is constantly forcing upon it a control, a measure, an artificial Procrustean rule that either succeeds in killing or petrifying life or constrains it into rigid forms and conventions that lame and imprison its capacity or ends in a bungle, a revolt of life, a decay or disruption of the systems and superstructures built upon it by our intelligence. An instinct, an intuition is needed, which the intellect has not at its command and does not always listen to when it comes in of itself to help the mental working. But still more difficult must it be for our reason to understand and deal with the suprarational. The suprarational is a realm of the spirit, and in the largeness, subtlety, profundity, complexity of its movement, the reason is lost. Here, intuition and inner experience alone are the guide, or if there is any other, it is that of which intuition is only a sharp edge, an intense projected ray. The final enlightenment must come from the supra-rational truth consciousness, from a supramental vision and knowledge. It's a huge para and the crux of the whole para is, he is going into great detail, we'll discuss it. But the crux of the para is that this universe, this existence from the highest level to the lowest level is not a one piece. It is built in many, 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 many planes, and each plane has got its own laws and its own characteristics, which are not applicable to another level. This is the basic thing what he's saying. And that's easy to understand, because even in the physical world it's like that. No? Even in the physical world, humanity is theoretically one, but we have 180 nations, and each nation has got its own laws which are not applicable in another country. It's very simple. So this is what he's saying here also. In the world we have 180 nations and all with different laws, but in the spiritual realm of existence, you can divide this into any number you want. But Sri Aurobindo says, I will follow the pattern of 7 planes of consciousness. There are many others who can say, we'll follow the 5 planes of consciousness. Ether, air, fire, water, earth. Or, if you want, Annamaya Kosha, Pranamaya Kosha, Manomaya Kosha, Vijnanamaya Kosha, then finally the Anandamaya Kosha. So you can divide into 5. It's not like a staircase, it's more like a ramp. So you can divide as you want. And in fact, Sri Aurobindo says in one place, you can divide into infinite. Every inch you go up, laws change. And you can also, there is one example we have given about the countries, okay? In India, we drive on the left. And in Europe, you drive on the right. Totally opposite. So, there are so many other examples we can give like that. So, this is exactly what he's saying. In Sweden, drugs are legal. In India, they are not legal, but you are not punished. You are punished in a mild manner. But in Singapore, you are not punished. You are just capital punishment without any questions asked. So laws goes on differing in every country. So here also. So we will follow, as Sri Aurobindo says, the 7 planes of consciousness. Matter, life, mind. Then we have the spiritual planes of consciousness. Okay? And then we have the higher mind, the illumined mind, the intuitive mind and the overmind, and then you have the supermind. And above the supermind is the Satchidananda, the absolute divine consciousness. So he's saying at every level, laws change, and what is applicable there cannot be applicable at another level. So we should not get puzzled by logic is only applicable at the mental level. It is neither applicable at the animal level, which is infra-rational, nor is it applicable at the spiritual level, which is supra-rational. That's basically what he's saying.
I'd like to share a joke.
Yeah?
In America, they drive on the right side of the road. In England, they drive on the left side of the road. And in India, they drive on what is left of the road.
Absolutely. All right. So,
a lot to go through here.
We go back to the beginning of the...
Mm-hmm.
In fact, it's interesting what you said just now, because India is a country which is really a puzzle to many other, particularly in the West. Here is one country, which is one country, but it has got 14 major languages and written and spoken in a different way. It has got so many different cuisines, so many different cultures, so many different forms of dressing, languages, everything is different, and yet there is a oneness. Okay. In fact, now we have just finished the pujas. Okay. In Bengal, there are the pujas, and in Gujarat, it comes in Navaratri. Okay. And then in the north, we have the burning of the image of Ravana. So there are all different things, but basically there is a oneness in the culture, but it takes different forms. So one person asked Sadhguru in one of the interviews, India is such a chaotic country, so how do you manage? So he answered, we love chaos. What he meant actually is that India is the best example of oneness in diversity.
Yes. Yes.
This truth has to be understood, because this is, the divine also has oneness, but he also has diversity, and both are applicable. So that's the interesting part, and India is a perfect example of that. Okay, so many different types of things. Let's get back to our text. So, we read the previous one. He says everything seems to be a mystery. So now Sridhar is explaining what that mystery is. But in fact, the cause of this impression must necessarily be sought not in anything illusory or fantastic in the supreme or the universal self-existence, but in our own inability to seize the supreme clue to its manifold existence or discover the secret plan and pattern of its action. So this is a sentence which has got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. 4.5. There is another chapter which deals only with the subject and is a full chapter. So I'll tell you what he's saying here. Okay, that's the reality and the illusion, the chapter. Okay, so he says there that what is this mystery? At our level, we are seeing the physical world as real. The material man sees the physical world as real. You go to the next level of consciousness and there you see the physical world as unreal. What is this? Which is the truth? Then you go to the higher level and again you see the reality, but in another way than how you are seeing here at this level. So where is the problem, he says. So the whole chapter, which is a very complicated chapter, he starts examining 3 things and he says, here he's saying it in one sentence. I'm going to put what the descriptions he explains. He says that in any process of knowledge, there are 3 things that matter. There is a knower, a consciousness that wants to know. There is something to be known, and there is a connection of knowledge between them. So these 3 are the process of anything which has to be known. Okay? The knower, the known, and knowledge. But Sridhar uses the words, the percipient, the one who is perceiving, the percept, that which is perceived, and perception. So, which one is at fault? Why are we seeing unreality? So, first he starts examining. Let us begin with the percept. Okay? Is the percept real or unreal? So, he takes up 2 cases. First, the percept is real. That's a materialistic theory. So, he examines the materialistic theory and he analyzes, and then he concludes something. I won't go into the conclusion because then I'll have to tell the whole chapter. Then he says, okay, we have dealt with the percept being real. Now let's see the percept as being unreal. And then he examines. Okay? Then, who is perceiving? If it is unreal, who is perceiving? Is it the Brahman who is perceiving, or is it the individual who is perceiving? So there again, it branches off into several discussions. So what I mean to say is, here he has put the solution, the problem and the solution in one sentence. There it's a whole chapter. Okay, 34 pages. So here he is telling you what the solution is. He's saying that yes, you do see reality and you do see unreality, but we are not to find the solution to the problem either in the reality or the unreality. We have to see it in our own incapacity. Is the perception that differs from plane to plane, not the percept or the perceiver. The problem is the perception. At one level, you are using instruments of knowledge which are defective. So you don't see the reality. As you keep going higher and higher, your instruments of perception become better and better. And at the highest level, there is no need of perception. The percept and the perceiver become one. Subject and object become one. Identity. So that's what he discusses in a whole chapter. Here he is telling you that the problem is not with the reality or the unreality. The problem is the way of perception.
Our inability.
That's right. Our inability. And what is that inability? At our level, the senses. The senses are defective. We know that very well. But we don't conclude from that. We know that the eyes can be colorblind. We know that there can be the eyesight in man is not as keen as that of an eagle. Or what about a chameleon? A different type of eyesight altogether. So it's built in one way, it is imperfect. So your senses are imperfect. That's what he's saying in this one first sentence. We read that sentence again. In fact, the cause of this impression. What is the impression? It's a mystery. Which is the reality? Okay, I can't understand what is the reality. Is it real or unreal? Must necessarily be sought not in anything illusory or fantastic in the Supreme or the universal self-existence. The Supreme is the Brahman, and he has created this self-existence. Neither here nor there should we look for it, but we have to look for it in our own inability to perceive the supreme clue to its manifold existence or discover the secret plan and pattern of its action. So we have to, the guilty party is the perception, not the perceiver or the percept. That's what he's saying. Okay, we go to the next sentence. The self-existent is the infinite, and its way of being and of action must be the way of the infinite. The self-existent, Sriyanda uses the word self-existence. He uses the word existence for substance, sat. The Sanskrit word sat. Sat, Chit, Ananda is the ultimate reality, and when he uses the word existence, he means substance at its subtlest, which is sat. At the lowest level, this substance becomes gross. He uses the word matter. But in between, and sometimes you can apply it here also, he uses the word substance. Okay? So existence, substance, and matter. It's the same thing in three different grades of subtlety. Okay? So now, he's saying, the self-existent. There is a self-existence, but the self-existent is the supreme divine, personal aspect. There is a difference between the existent and the existence. So existence is impersonal, but the existent is personal. Okay? So naturally he is referring to the supreme, the supermind. The self-existent is the infinite, and its way of being and of action. So, what does he mean by being and action? You must say being, the reality in the physical world. Okay? The way of being and its action. Action is only at the physical level, not at the higher level. So he is talking of the physical world. Must be the way of the infinite. Okay? So even the physical world is infinite, he is saying. But we are perceiving it in a different way. But our consciousness is limited. Our reason is built upon things finite. It is irrational to suppose that a finite consciousness and reason can be a measure of the infinite. So, this is easy to understand. The finite can never understand the infinite. Okay, that's obvious. So, this smallness cannot judge that immensity. This poverty, bound to a limited use of its scanty means, cannot conceive the opulent management of those riches. So, beautiful sentence. This poverty, the poverty of at the physical level, bound to the limited sense of its scanty means. What are the scanty means? Your senses. The senses are the scanty means. Okay? So, cannot conceive the opulent management of those riches. Beautiful. When you go up, there is a wealth of variety, and that variety is opulent. Okay? So, an ignorant half-knowledge cannot follow the motions of the all-knowledge. Our reasoning is based upon our experience of the finite operations of physical nature. All physical nature's operations are finite in the physical world. Whatever it creates. Okay, however infinite it may seem, it is finite. The universe itself may be infinite, but all the forms in it are finite. Even the largest planets, the largest stars, they are all finite. So, our reasoning is based upon our experience of the finite operations of physical nature on an incomplete observation and uncertain understanding of something that acts within limits. So, all our things are finite and we act within limits. But that is unlimited and infinite. So, that is the problem. Okay? Within limits. It has organized on that basis certain conceptions which it seeks to make general and universal. And whatever contradicts or departs from these conceptions, it regards as irrational, false, or inexplicable. Naturally, we have to make our rules and regulations according to our own what we perceive as right and wrong. And that is limited. And we try to extend our rules to others also, to the other regions and the other. And this is also true of human beings. Na? I have my own opinions and I try to impose these opinions on others. So, mankind is limited and he has certain rules of thinking, rationality and all, which he tries to extend into other fields, which is illegitimate. That is not right. Okay, that's what he says. It has organized on that basis certain conceptions which it seeks to make general and universal. And whatever contradicts or departs from these conceptions, it regards as irrational, false, or inexplicable. One example of this is, its conception is that there are opposites in the physical world and they are not compatible with each other. Perfectly valid at our level, but not valid at other levels. It's possible for the divine to be one and many. He can be the finite and the infinite together at the same time. We come back to the famous lines of Blake. To see a world in a grain of sand and heaven in a wild flower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour. He was a mystic, Blake, so he could see the reality that the finite and the infinite are connected.
So when Sri Aurobindo says inexplicable.
Yes. For the reason it is inexplicable.
Mm-hmm.
But if you put your reason aside and go there and say, okay, reason, you are not good enough instrument. I want a better instrument. With intuition, he is going to tell you later on. There you can understand. There you can understand. So, and whatever contradicts or departs from these conceptions, it regards as irrational, false, and inexplicable. But there are different orders of the reality, and the conceptions, measures, standards suitable to one need not be applicable to another order. We have discussed this. Our physical being is built first upon an aggregate of infinitesimals, electrons, atoms, molecules, cells. But the law of action of these infinitesimals does not explain all the physical workings even of the human body. Much less can they cover all the law and processes of action of man's supraphysical parts. Supraphysical parts, he means the life movements and the mind movements and soul movements. They are all supraphysical. Supraphysical, life is not matter. It is higher, mind is not matter, soul is not matter. Now this is very interesting what he is saying here, because he is almost anticipating nanotechnology. Just see carefully and you will see that he is anticipating nanotechnology. That is the biggest thing in the world today. Okay, the going down to the atomic level and using those things for many solutions that we can have, which are not available at our normal level. Okay, so just see carefully. He is saying our physical being is built first upon an aggregate of infinitesimals, electrons, atoms, molecules, cells. But the law of action of these infinitesimals does not explain all the physical workings even of the human body. Much less can they cover all the law and process of action of man's supraphysical parts, his life movements and mind movements and soul movements. So, what is applicable at the physical level is not applicable at the life level, nor is it applicable at the mental level. Very clear, we can understand that. But he's going to say something very interesting now, we'll see. In the body, finites have been formed with their own habits, properties, characteristics, ways of action. The body itself is a finite, which is not a mere aggregate of smaller finites which it uses as parts, organs, constituent instruments of its operations. It has developed a being and has a general law which surpasses its dependence upon these elements or constituents. So, the body is made up of the heart, the lungs, the liver, the bones, the stomach, the brain, all these things it is made up. If I take all these things and put them into a basket, will I get a human being? I won't. It's an organic whole. So the man is more than the sum of his parts. This is the reality in the physical world also. The whole universe, you can find out the laws of each part, but the universe is more than the sum of its parts. That's what it means. And the best example is the body. Okay, that's what he's saying. Uses parts, organs, constituents, instruments of its operations. It has developed a being and has a general law which surpasses its dependence upon these elements. There you are. It doesn't depend only on the heart, it doesn't depend only on the liver, it doesn't depend only on the brain. Even if the brain gets damaged, it continues to live. Okay? Even if the stomach gets damaged, it continues to live. Even if the heart is damaged, it can continue to live. Even if there is no respiration, still life is there. That's exactly what he's saying. Okay? He's saying, it has developed a being and has a general law which surpasses its dependence upon these elements or constituents. The life and mind again are supraphysical finites with a different and more subtle mode of operation of their own, and no dependence on the physical parts for instrumentation can annul their intrinsic character. There is something more and other in our vital and mental being and vital and mental forces than the functioning of a physical body. But again, each finite is in its reality or has behind it an infinite which has built and supports and directs the finite it has made as its self-figure. This is a very interesting sentence. We'll have a look at it carefully. But again, each finite is in its reality or has behind it, an infinite. Take the human being only. We can take that, The human being is a finite. But is he really limited? Swayambhu tells you that the universe condensed is the individual. He is the microcosm of the macrocosm. So what is this macrocosm? There is something in him, there is something behind him, there is something underneath him, and there is something above him. Here he is mentioning only inside and behind. So, the behind is the intraconscient, the below is the subconscient and the inconscient, and the above is the superconscient. This is what man is. He is not only the body. That's what he's saying. So, but again, finite made its figure. And also, let's understand this. And directs the finite it is made as its self-figure. That's interesting. You have I think in the Bible also you have this phrase, man is made in the image of God or something like that. I'm not sure, but that's exactly what he's saying here. So there is this anthropomorphic idea that whatever we are, we extend to God or even to the animal. So that's an anthropomorphic idea, that man is essential. The divine is the values that we have, we extend to God. But it is a self-figure. The human being is a self-figure. It's an image. It's a silhouette of the reality. Not the full reality, but part reality. That's what he's saying. Self-figure, not the word, self-figure. Okay? It's a figure, but a figure of the self. So that even the being and law and process of the finite cannot be totally understood without knowledge of that which is occult within or behind it. There you are. Okay? So, within is, the divine is there individually, and behind it is the cosmos. Again, we come back to that idea that the divine expresses himself in three ways: transcendentally, universally, and individually. Okay? Our finite knowledge, conceptions, standards may be valid within their limits, but they are incomplete and relative. At each level, the laws that operate there are valid only in that field. That's what he's saying. A law founded upon an observation of what is divided in space and time cannot be confidently applied to the being and action of the indivisible. Not only it cannot be applied to the spaceless and timeless infinite, but it cannot be applied even to a time infinite or a space infinite. So there is a timeless infinite, and the world is time infinite. That is also spaceless infinite, but this is space infinite. A law and process binding for our superficial being need not be binding on what is occult within us. So, what is occult within us? The divine presence, the psychic being, or even the inner being, the inner vital, inner mind, inner vital, inner physical. Even that is the inner being.
When we study this word occult, Sri Aurobindo says it's very different in India from the West.
Yes.
Here in India, it simply means hidden.
That's right.
But not some deep, mystical...
Yes. And I had watched a video once of Ranganathan, my namesake. Okay, he was the president of the Ramakrishna Mission, and he had gone to Australia, and he gave a very interesting image. He says, take the matchstick. There's fire in it. It's hidden there. But you have to, by yoga, you have to learn how to get that fire out of that. So that's a very interesting image he gave, and it's very nice. There is fire in wood also, in coal also, everywhere there is fire, but you must know how to extract it. Okay, so that's hidden. As you said, it's hidden. Occult is hidden. Okay, so a law and process binding for our superficial being need not be binding on what is occult within us. Again, our intellect, founding itself on reason, finds it difficult to deal with what is infrarational. We cannot understand the operation of the animal world. Very often we don't understand. Okay? Some mysteries are there which I think even now they have not been able to solve. For instance, okay, some we can understand. Sometimes a cat may give 4 or 5 kittens, but it eats up one. We sound cannibalistic at the animal level, but that's because probably it knows that it cannot feed all. So that's some understandable. But what about the phenomena of lemmings in Iceland?
Yeah.
Thousands all go and jump into the sea all at once. What is this mystery? Why should that happen? Then there is another one also which is very interesting, we don't understand. To a certain extent you can understand. Whales that beach themselves.
Yes.
Okay? They just come and beach themselves and then they die. Unless men put them back into. And when they push them back into the way, they are very happy and they go away. So there are many things in the physical world, infrarational world, which man can't understand by his reason, by his intellect. He can't understand. So, infrarational. Life is intrarational, and we find that our intellectual reason, applying itself to life, is constantly forcing upon it a control, a measure, an artificial Procrustean rule that either succeeds in killing or petrifying life or constrains it into rigid forms and conventions that lame and imprison its capacity, or ends by a bungle, a revolt of life, a decay or disruption of the systems and superstructures it is built upon it by our intelligence. So, an artificial Procrustean rule. This is a very interesting. Procrustes was a robber. It's a Greek legend. And when he used to rob people, he used to kill them by doing something. He had only, his bed was of a particular size. So if the man was too short, he would stretch him to fit that bed. And if he was too tall, then he would cut off his leg or something like that. So that's a Procrustean rule that Swami is talking about. Our reason is Procrustes, and we want everything to fit into that. So that's what he's talking about. Procrustean rule. That either succeeds in killing or petrifying life, or constrains it into rigid forms and conventions that lame and imprison its capacity, or ends by a bungle, a revolt of life, a decay or disruption of the systems and superstructures built upon it by our intelligence. So we are constantly blundering, but as we go on, we blunder, but we also understand. We think that the marshes are a wasted space. So we take out the water and make it land, and Back Bay reclamation in Bombay, for instance. That's in Florida also. I think they have done many things like that. They dry up these and use it as for real estate. But you are damaging the balance of nature. That's what we don't understand how to do. This is what is happening. We exploit our minerals and all that, and we are pulling down all mountains, but climate change is a huge thing. Okay? And there are some nations which don't accept that even. No, we are not doing any damage to the... America is one of those guilty parties.
Who?
America.
Very
some of them
true.
are...
The carbon.
Yeah. But there are some who... That former president, he was the one going all around the world telling that climate change is really a big issue. So, but some in America don't accept that. But now it is generally recognized, and we are trying to get that in 10 years' time to reduce the carbon output. Let's hope it succeeds. In Pondicherry, even our patterns of monsoon are changing. We used to get very clear monsoon in Pondicherry, November, December. Now it's coming sometimes in October, sometimes even earlier. The other monsoon and this monsoon is also merging. A lot of... in Europe and America, it's even worse. Floods and forest fires and drought. All these things are coming. Completely change.
We are seeing it in China also.
Yes, China also. Yeah. All right. So this is what Swami is saying. If you try to apply our reason to everything which is outside the field of reason, then it ends by a bungle, a revolt of life, a decay or disruption of the systems and superstructures built upon it by our intelligence. The same thing applies to a certain extent also on the genetically managed crops. Yeah. Same thing. Okay. So there's a danger in that. So an instinct now, that's what he's saying. Not reason, but an instinct, an intuition is needed, which the intellect has not at its command and does not always listen to when it comes in of itself to help the mental working. In fact, the higher planes of consciousness and even the intraconscious is the psychic being is sending constantly help and helpful suggestions and hints and impulsions. But the thick veils of body-mind life distort these impressions and we don't accept it. Even from the higher level, intuitions are coming. But by the time it enters into the mental substance, Srivada's got a very beautiful description of this process. He says, intuition is at a subtle level of substance. Let's say like the it's difficult to express, but the different densities of air, okay? So when it comes down into the denser, the subtle comes down into the denser layers, it gets covered up. So the substance of intuition is subtle, and when it comes into the denser mental substance, it gets covered up by that substance. So you think it to be a thought. It's not a thought, it's an intuition. That's what Swami is saying here. He's saying an instinct, an intuition is needed which the intellect has not at its command and does not always listen to when it comes in of itself to help the mental working. But still more difficult must it be for our reason to understand and deal with the supra-rational. So we cannot understand that which is inside and behind. Inside is the individual and behind is the universal. So much more difficult is it to understand the supra-rational, which is transcendent. That's what he's saying. The supra-rational is a realm of the spirit, and in the largeness, subtlety, profundity, complexity of its movement, the reason is lost. Here, intuition and inner experience alone are the guide, or if there is any other, it is that of which intuition is only a sharp edge, an intense projected ray. The final enlightenment must come from the supra-rational truth consciousness, from a supra-rational vision and knowledge. As you rise in consciousness beyond reason, you enter into intuition, and also he is using the word inner experience and intuition, but the truth is not there also at that level. The truth is there only at the highest level, which is the supra-rational truth consciousness. So when he uses the word truth consciousness, you can be 100% sure he is talking of the supermind. Truth consciousness. Okay? So long para, but basically the message is simple. Don't confuse the different planes of consciousness. They are all different and they have all got different laws, and one law here is not applicable there. Neither below nor above. They are all different.
He often gives us the example of morality.
Exactly. At the mental level, at the animal level, no morality. At the human level, with the mental, morality. You go to the higher level of consciousness, morality disappears. Morality is not applicable. It's there, but it's not applicable. So, although it is very big, but it's very easy to understand what he has said. But it's gone into great detail. That's the interesting part, okay?
Okay. Namaste all. Thank you for coming.